Take these two over to the garage, will you? I want them cleaned up before dinner.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist of the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now a galaxy far, far away, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Doing well. It's our second crack at analyzing the original Star Wars, which we thought would be a short episode, but because we have decided to map out Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, it's turned into part 2 of a 2-episode series.
Not such a simple story. The original, The New Hope.
It is a simple story. We're just trying to educate folks who don't already know the Campbell work and lore.
I think this is also the opportunity for us both to deepen an appreciation of Luke Skywalker. Both of us have some apprehension about accepting him as our central influential character, I guess.
And you think that's going to change with this?
It could.
Okay, good luck with that. Challenge accepted.
Well, I also had some feedback from friends and folks who wanted to comment on our debate on whether Luke Skywalker was in a position of privilege or not. And being clear about this, it's not as if we felt it was binary. You either have a singular privilege or you do not.
Yeah.
I don't think in any universe that's how this works.
Correct.
But I think where we both found common ground was that his very remote, detached, almost unaffected lifestyle is what made us both come to a position on it, right? For you, that meant he was privileged because he just didn't have to be affected by the oppression of the government, maybe the way other communities were.
Yeah.
And I think, too, we have to look at the whole, not just Tatooine, not just this particular civilization or community, but the whole landscape of how people could opt in or out of the war as well. It sounded as though he almost had an option there as well.
Luke?
Yeah.
I mean, he wanted to hop into something. He wanted to leave. He wanted to leave his community. He wanted to go to the academy. Presumably, he would be fighting against somebody, or he would expect to be fighting against somebody. I think the one thing that folks need to understand is that the word privilege has sort of been politicized over the last few years. And it's easy to hear that word and automatically jump to a negative conclusion if you're not on the side of someone who believes that privilege is a thing. I had someone text me and say, and I think very wisely, in fact, I can tell you it was my father who comes from a long line of like farmer and self-sufficient. He actually said that he didn't necessarily think Luke was privileged so much as he was self-sufficient. And that he came from a self-sufficient family, as farmers often have to be. And I don't disagree with that, but I do think that there comes a certain privilege with being able to be self-sufficient. You know, if you do not have to lean on anyone else for help to survive, you are in some way privileged. And I know that you had said that in the grand scheme of the universe, this little farm boy on a desert planet was not necessarily privileged per se, But I would say, it all comes within little microcosms, right? Like if we go out to the middle of the Amazon somewhere and come across a tribe that's never met anyone from a more civilized society, the chief or king of that tribe is certainly going to be more privileged than the other people in that tribe. That doesn't mean that the rest of the world doesn't have additional privilege that comes with it, or that the rest of the universe doesn't have additional privilege that comes with it. I'm just saying that Luke has never really had to fight for anything. He has been provided his whole life in this little town, and it's so dull for him because he's never had to work for it. He desperately wants to leave. He wants to see something bigger.
And that is the sort of the crux of the beginnings of his story, the mundaneness.
Yes.
Of that life. And to be clear, I think I'm much more literal about privilege. I believe it is when a person or society has this automatic benefit, advantage, or favor, typically unearned and largely unacknowledged in the source or in the way of advantages and resources. Mm-hmm. So one could argue that some parts of Luke's identity include privilege.
Yeah.
And that he has been born into and raised into this kind of independent farm life, mm-hmm. and hasn't had to defend it, hasn't had to think about his freedoms, hasn't ever had to worry about being enslaved or his rights being compromised or violated in any way.
And let's go back a little bit, because even though this was the very first movie that was made, let's go back to the prequel trilogy, because that certainly came first. We know what midichlorians does to someone as they grow up, whether they realize it's the Force or not. Anakin Skywalker had certain advantages. He was mechanically gifted. He could fly better than anyone else naturally. He jumped into a starfighter and flew it like he had no problem whatsoever. And in fact, joked that this is this is pod racing. He had certain gifts, and we've learned that Luke is an amazing pilot. He can blast womp rats 2 meters, and he says it very nonchalantly toward the end of the movie, where he's like, well, that's not such a big deal. I do that all the time back home. But what we are made to understand is this is the Force working through him. Not everyone can blast a 2-meter womp rat at a certain speed. And as we see at the end of this movie, several people get their shot at the target and miss. And it's not until
Why isn't everyone this talented? Why isn't everyone as skilled as I am? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. And it's like, look, he basically does the he does the equivalent of look, I can hit this shot with my eyes closed by turning off his targeting computer and only going with his feeling. That is privilege. Whether he acknowledges it or realizes it or not, he has certain ingrained benefits within him that other people around him don't have. And that's why I say that a TV show like Andor is so much more interesting to me, because I get to watch a guy work for it and actually do things that are considered bad in societal terms, and sort of against the norm. I get to watch a guy in the seedy underbelly of the rebellion, and not just one guy, but a bunch of people. We get to see what that means to literally begin a rebellion. And I'm not viewing it through the lens of a kid who's just naturally able to do everything on his own. Even if you go into, and we're not going to, obviously, but even if you go into the extended universe of the books and the video games and all that stuff, Luke Skywalker was at the crux of every story no
Yeah.
matter what. Like, and he was the guy who did all that stuff. So that's why I sort of feel the way I do about Luke Skywalker versus any of these other characters.
Well, and I think that it's important to add or to contextualize that with knowing that having the Force, being Force sensitive, even before you are trained in it, sort of the intuitive, whether you want to call it midichlorians or something a little bit more spiritual, whatever that inclination is, in a universe like this is a benefit. There might be places where that type of skill or spiritual inclination or depth of knowledge doesn't get you anywhere. I can't think of one right now, but let's stick with the definition of privilege in that it matters where you are in society. It matters the positionality, if you will, of this type of skill. And in this universe, having the Force as a benefit is a huge deal. So there, I completely agree with you. I would say on those levels, yes, he is a kid of privilege. And I think what makes me most curious about him is that he is unaware of it. And that's kind of the piece that I'm grappling with is I'm supposed to connect to you, but you are not quite self-aware yet. You are not quite self-conscious of the way in which you are and how the way in which you are is actually more advantageous than maybe how other people are. And it's interesting because then when he gets there and starts to explore that within himself, he develops some grandiosity about it.
Yes, a significant amount of confidence
Which,
that we will see
which
throughout
we'll
the
get to.
that we'll see throughout the trilogy and even beyond. But would you say that what you're describing, as you describe it to me, I am hearing things in real life. Like I recognize things, people who are told, look, because of this, because of where you're from, because of the color of your skin, because of your gender, because of whatever, you have a certain amount of privilege that you carry with you. And I kid you not, 8 out of 10 people would argue with you and say they're not privileged. They don't recognize it. They don't see it. They would then get into an argument with you and tell you, oh yeah, well here are all the ways I'm not privileged.
Sure. The defensiveness is a reaction.
Yeah. So Luke is in that position of no one's telling him he's privileged and he's fighting back, but he is in that position that he doesn't understand. He has not grasped.
He is completely self-unaware. No one has
the power that he has.
He has not had enough social interaction to lend itself to some of those self-discoveries. And that's where that interests me more. So where we start with Luke is unremarkable to me. I get, and we're returning to the first half of the film, which we've already covered, but I get that the symbolism of his yearning and the clear, blatant vastness of this desert planet, the mundaneness of his life, all of that, the boring color palette, the different cups and plates and the beiges, all of that is to tell us this is a very unremarkable, stagnant, kind of mundane existence. And he is frustrated.
Yes.
He is visibly, understandably bored and confused and he just wants more. And I think that of anything, that yearning, that looking up into the sky at the two suns, that is what connects us the most. That those moments of like, okay, we've all been there. This is the beginning of the hero's journey, escaping the mundaneness, finding purpose, finding how we matter,
Yeah.
and facing the shadows, the dangers, the threats, the anxieties of the world. That is probably the most, I'd say that the psychological value, like that's for me where that comes from. That's probably what really drew me to the story.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the last episode, we had reached a very pivotal point in the hero's journey. For those who don't know and didn't hear the first episode, we are sort of running through Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, through the lens of Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces and the hero's journey. And we reached the point that we're looking out over Mos Eisley, which I would say is the crossing of the first threshold. So he has been presented with his mission. He has refused the call. He has met his mentor. We said last time that C-3PO very well could be the Herald, although some people would say Princess Leia is the Herald because she is the one who delivers the message to R2, who then has to deliver the message to Obi-Wan. But you and I had said that we thought 3PO was the Herald because throughout the trilogy or throughout the franchise, 3PO is the one who's always telling the audience how bad of an idea this is and how this is dangerous, and he's giving us the odds, even though he's being told not to give us the odds. Like, they literally have to shut him down occasionally because he won't stop talking about how bad this is. And to me, that's very much the Herald. Other people would say that 3PO and R2 are the trickster. It's possible that they're both. I do not know. But we have gone with our mentor to Mos Eisley, where we are going to meet a couple of folks who I would say are the loyal retainers. This is the role of characters who are sort of side characters, who are allies of our hero, who are also heroic. So Han Solo and Chewbacca are certainly the loyal retainers because, as you can see, they're not bumbling sidekicks. In fact, they spend a significant amount of time, at least in the beginning of the movie, throughout most of the movie, sort of teaching Luke the ways of anywhere not on Tatooine. It's like, oh, kid, you're so naive. You've never been off this planet. And so yeah, I would say Han and Chewbacca are the loyal retainers whom they meet in the cantina. Pirates and scallywags themselves, they're accustomed to smuggling cargo to and from places. Han Solo in particular is in trouble with a local Hutt gangster by the name of Jabba because he dropped a shipment. He was afraid that he was going to get boarded and found out and presumably arrested and all that other stuff. So he basically chucked the cargo and got into a lot of trouble. So he has bounties on his head. Bounty hunters are after him. And we see just how dangerous he can be in his own right.
Dangerous meaning he'll shoot a guy.
First.
Yeah. At all.
At all, period.
Yeah.
He'll be the only one to shoot. Yeah. This is why I love the scene so much prior to George going in and tweaking it and making him shoot second is this is a character who's not doing it out of self-defense so much as he is doing it out of preservation. He's doing it out of, but it's not self-defense. It's under a table. I will totally unbuckle my holster. I will remove my blaster. I will shoot you if I think it's going to come down to one or the two of us. He will do it underhandedly, under a table. Like this is a guy who doesn't mind shooting you in the back if it means.
Are we meant to believe that Greedo is more menacing than Han Solo? So are we given the sense that Han is right in his decision, that he is a little bit on the defense, that while that move is offensive, this is a dynamic, they had already set the stage. This is a very threatening scenario. These are the fringes, right? These are the folks who are engaged in criminal activity and are not trustworthy and carry weapons. And this is kind of the Wild West of the universe.
Yes, totally.
Meaning that laws aren't really going to work out here. They're really not as important as your own set of ethics.
Well, and we see straight up after he shoots Greedo, everyone in the cantina stops for a second before they simply resume their conversations and their drinks. This is not something they don't see every day. And in fact, before the body is even moved, Han Solo walks up to the bartender, hands him some money, and says, "Sorry for the mess." It's taken care of. Yeah, it's taken care of. It seems like a lawless land, even though it is guarded by the first of what I would think are, well, maybe not the first, but I would certainly associate the stormtroopers as the guardians of the threshold. They are meant to be the barrier that keeps our hero from going into this darker territory. They're almost an opportunity for our hero to turn around and leave. And because the mentor uses the Jedi mind trick, the stormtroopers let them go, and they move and officially cross the threshold. But there are actually several characters or even things over the course of the movie that I would say are additional guardians. Because the role of the guardian of the threshold is to literally be in the way, to prevent our heroes from actually achieving their goal, their task. And one could say that the Jawas.
I was just going to say the Jawas sort of have that interference.
Certainly, the Jawas. You could say that the Tusken Raiders did. I mean, they beat the hell out of him and left him unconscious. And, I would say that they are guardians of the threshold. And notice how he becomes more and more adept at facing them himself. Like, he didn't really have to deal with the Jawas. That was more his father or his uncle, rather. He lost his fight against the Tusken Raiders, the Sand People. It wasn't until Obi-Wan makes a weird noise and signals his arrival that the Tusken Raiders leave. So Luke becomes more and more able to do it himself as the movie goes on, particularly as his mentor is taken away from him. But from this point, they launch off out into space, which I would say is the belly of the whale, because this is him now leaving the only world he's ever known. Unlike Anakin, he doesn't talk about how cold. It's cold up here in space. I'm used to being in the hot sun on the desert. Now I'm in the cold. Here's a Chapor snippet. Luke's almost excited. He's excited to be out in space, to see things for the first time. That's him going off into Campbell's belly of the whale. From this point on, there is a significant amount of time spent with the next step, which is basically just the trials, the enemies, and the allies. Right, we meet a whole bunch of allies, we meet a whole bunch of enemies, and it's basically this step of the hero's journey for most of the rest of the movie. I guess maybe until they escape the Death Star. They end up rescuing Leia, who doesn't really appear to have needed rescue at all. She's pretty handy on her own.
I mean, I think we should pause there because at that point she had been essentially imprisoned, interrogated, ostensibly tortured. We don't really see that. That happens off screen.
But we know it's happening because the little black probe droid comes in, the interrogation droid comes in, and it's got a needle in it. Like, we know they poked her with something.
Yeah. And then she's, for a moment, and I think I totally agree with you. Her helplessness is temporary compared to the other states that she's been in, with her endurance, her persistence, her determination, willingness not to give away the site of the plans. It led to the destruction of her home world, which was devastating. So she experiences the destruction of Alderaan, which is where she's from, completely witnesses essentially a genocide, and then has to endure all of that trauma and destruction while she's in this prison cell.
Yeah, and when we get to the prison cell block 1138, she seems bored. Like, she's not traumatized at this point.
Well,
like
yeah, I mean, she is traumatized.
Well, correct.
She's experienced these traumas. She's probably still in a state of I think that is kind of her call to action. Yeah. Which is rarely paralleled with Luke's call to action, but I disagree that she's bored. I think there might be this impact, this emotional impact that has.
Sure. I think when I say that, and you're absolutely right. So I misspoke, but there is a nonchalance about her when the door opens and she's laying on that slab, that gray slab, and she just sort of sits up like, all right, now what?
Yeah.
And then she sees this short stormtrooper. She mocks him. He reveals that he's there to rescue her. When he mentions Kenobi, she gets excited, pushes past him. Like, this is someone who is in charge. This is someone who is in control of her emotions and her, like, she's super determined to win this.
Yeah.
But when Luke opens the door to her cell, she doesn't seem broken down in any way.
And what I like about this is, now that with Andor we're learning more about the various figures within the Rebel Alliance, there is a state of mind that they're in.
Yes.
This is, I think, a tremendous character building. In a way, I guess the opportunity for this character to be a bit one-dimensional was there, right? Oh gosh, she's lost her family, she's lost her homeworld, she's been tortured. This could have been a female character who's vulnerable, crying, helpless,
help me.
completely
crying and
within
and
that
withered.
Yeah, that damsel in distress archetype. And she is written in a way that subverts that that persona. You had all of these different experiences and critical events that would lead us to think like, okay, she's going to be completely broken. Like there's how she needs rescuing. And the subversion of this is, maybe I didn't see it as boredom, but maybe this is the impatience of her. Like, we still have work to do. I'm temporarily out of control. I am in this cell, so I've lost the ability for forward movement, and I'm just waiting to get out finally And she does. And then she's back into action, and she's a very proactive character, unwilling to be minimized by either male character. And I think I said this in the last episode, but refuses to be backgrounded. She's written in a way where she's consistently foregrounded and has her own respectable place in the story.
Well, and the reason being, she's the only one of them who's ever done any of this, presumably. I mean, or has ever been trained to do any of this. If you want to go by Solo was a soldier. He was an infantryman who was there fighting with the Empire, but always sort of casually. He didn't believe in the cause. Probably wasn't necessarily a good soldier. Luke has certainly never been in a position like this. She has been raised within the rebellion by her father. And she takes the rifle from him, returns fire back to the stormtroopers, comes up with the plan to shoot into the trash compactor. Like she takes charge of the group. And yeah, I do appreciate that she isn't allowing herself to be.
Where is that in the hero's journey? Sort of the sharing of the heroic figure, or even the threat that another person
might take over
central. Yeah, it's sort of interesting, because the hero's journey for me is intensely psychological, and has, I believe, and some did say that Joseph Campbell was greatly influenced by Carl Jung.
Sure. I mean,
who was a one of the leading founders of analytical psychology.
Yes.
So the idea, if we kind of center on the ego, right? The idea that there's another central character or figure who is more adept and skillful and ready and proactive and kind of competing for the story, i.e., taking away from your own journey. What is that?
Well, does she in some way become? Is she a replacement for the mentor character at some point?
No,
like someone to teach him how to handle himself in a war situation.
No, because it's like
you're saying she could threaten to become the central character of the story, but
so she is wise like a mentor, but she's not giving advice and guidance to him.
Not in the same way that Obi-Wan does, but if the kid were smart, he would certainly watch how this princess handles herself and, pick up a few things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and right now within the context of this particular set of scenes here in the Death Star, I would say that this is sort of the embodiment of the trials, because
totally.
You've not just, they had to take over the uniforms of the stormtroopers. They have to then get into the detention center. They've got to rescue Leia. They then have to battle their way out of the trash compactor, or get their way out of the trash compactor, where potentially another guardian of the threshold is there in the little the trash compactor monster. Then they have to battle through more stormtroopers. Ben has to disengage the tractor beam. They then have to they have battled through in order to get back to the Millennium Falcon. This is where the mentor is killed, which is traditional in a hero's journey. Presumably to leave our hero on his own without guidance, but we find out that that's not entirely true.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because later on, we're going to hear the mentor talk to him again.
So you think that the mentor talking to him again is...
The mentor died but didn't die. I mean, he died, but I mean, his body is not there, but his spirit certainly is. And
do your mentors...
They don't talk to me after they die.
They do. So does their wisdom, do the phrases...
Sure, but that's metaphorical.
That's
sure, but
what
this isn't a metaphor. He's actually talking to Luke.
Well, but it is a metaphor.
But it's not. He is literally talking to Luke. He is telling Luke how to win.
So for me, the experience of that story is the metaphor of the guidance and wisdom sitting with you somewhere. So I can't help but have that analytical piece to it.
Sure.
That when we are in trouble, when we're vulnerable, when we're confused and we're facing the threats, either of our own unconscious or an external evil, that we turn to the wisdom of our mentors and the folks that gave us that guidance. And he does this. One could even say that he could call upon
but he didn't
his mentor.
No, because in that moment he's not looking for his mentor's guidance. He's worried. He's looking square into the targeting computer, and he is going to fail the same way all the other pilots have failed, because he is not reaching out with those things that he had learned. He has forgotten. He has become the pilot and not the Jedi that he had been trained for about 10 minutes to actually be. Mm-hmm. It's not until Obi-Wan steps in and says, Luke, reach out with your feelings, use the Force, etc. That's when Luke turns off his targeting computer. Whereas I would say if I were the hero in a hero's journey, and my mentor suddenly wasn't there, I would look back and say, well, what would my mentor have done? Oh, that wisdom that I have learned, the guidance that I've learned, etc. That's where the embodiment of my mentor is. But in this case, the mentor went, hey, doofus, what have I been teaching you to do? So because he literally reaches out, I would say that it's not as metaphorical. Once we escape the Death Star, we go to Yavin 4, and the plans are analyzed. There's a weakness. A small port, exhaust port, about 2 meters, basically the size of a womp rat. Fire a torpedo inside of it and destroy the Death Star, and the rebellion wins. Han Solo goes through his own personal journey, because at this moment he begins to take his reward, which is promised to us at the end of the hero's journey, and says, okay, I'm out. I have no desire to go on a suicide run back to the Death Star. You guys can do it on your own. I did what I came to do. And he takes his money and leaves. Okay, so this is what I would call the approach to the innermost cave. This is them going back to the Death Star with the attempt to destroy it and bring back victory and even hope to the rebellion. Talk a little bit about that, Drea, and this character of Luke Skywalker now going back to where he just came from. Actually, they came to him, really, to the Yavin moon, but taking on the Death Star once again, and the Shadow in Darth Vader. And
the Shadow, which he now has seen.
He's seen him, yeah. He saw him strike down his mentor.
Joseph Campbell had said that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. You must engage in this confrontation. And here, honestly, for me, the confrontation is with Darth Vader. It is the Death Star. It is the mission to destroy the Death Star. That is what everyone is on board to do.
Yeah.
For Luke, there is a deeper
Personal.
Yeah, there's this
That he doesn't know about yet. For him, it's more vengeance because he sees him take down his
Right.
mentor, but really we know as an audience that this is a much bigger deal than even Luke realizes.
with the parental relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he knows there's the shadow, right? This is the dark figure who represents the obstacle, who has destroyed his mentor, who is the physical embodiment of darkness. And I think to approach the Death Star with the intention to destroy the world that the shadow embodies and rules, that's kind of a confrontation with Darth Vader.
Yeah.
The Jungian piece to this is an understanding that in order for us to find our innermost peace, a fulfillment, a wholeness, we do have to confront the dangers out there. And it's not just any random danger. That's why Luke's story is pretty fascinating. It's not as if you slay every dragon that you see or that you come across. You slay the dragon that's in front of you, the obstacle. So we all have to deepen our understanding around what is the most threatening to our sense of self, to our purpose, to our wholeness. That is something complicated and deep within our consciousness. That is whatever obstacle is keeping us from our peace, our restfulness.
Yeah.
And Jung was clear that we fight to conquer the ground of peace that is outside of our own psyches. So for Luke, that is a direct association with confronting Darth Vader and destroying the Death Star. So a piece of this is a little bit unknown to him, but this is the biggest challenge he's ever confronted. This is huge for him.
Even though he,
I mean, he's right. He
he
shot at
literally
P1
said,
brats.
yeah, this isn't such a big deal. Meanwhile, he's watching everyone that he's just come to know either abandon him or die around him. We move into the ordeal, which is literally the attack onto the Death Star, where everyone dies around him. He becomes the last one. Which I think takes us into the resurrection, because that's where what you're talking about, Drea, this idea of the wisdom permeating into the X-Wing and telling him, no, this is what I would do. Here's where all the lessons I've taught you come into play. Luke switches off the targeting computer, destroys the Death Star. And that becomes the resurrection. That becomes him becoming a new person. He is now the hero he was meant to be. He has now fulfilled his journey. And by the way, I would also say that this is a resurrection for Han Solo as well, because Han Solo took the money and ran, and then in the end came back. And so I believe that it's almost a death of one character and a resurrection of another for Han as well.
You know, he's been cited as a shapeshifter in the hero's journey, because Han in some way can be self-centered and lacking compassion. And then in another moment, he is empathetic and altruistic.
Yeah.
I don't know I think I would agree with you more in that he is experiencing his own development and growth. Not that he flip-flops, but that he is coming to terms with the sense of unity that he had with these new friends of his.
Mm-hmm. And then we are given the return back to Yavin and our victory, our hope, a belief that we can win this thing, and then we are literally given medals. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo.
You have learned a lesson. Here is your token of that lesson.
I have to ask a question about the medals, though. Like I'm also of the opinion that Chewbacca should have gotten a medal. Did they have enough medals made up for anyone else who might have survived that trench run? Like, say it wasn't just Luke by himself and Han having come in from behind.
Luke shot the winning shot.
Right. Did they only have enough medals for like one person who may have shot the winning shot, and then there's another one for the guy who came in and shot Vader?
No, they made the medals later.
Oh, you think that? Oh, they like. Oh, we should.
I think after everything, they buried their dead. They looked at all the remnants of the recovery, and they thought, we really need to recognize,
get the morale up.
2 to 3 people that were
just the two of them.
Just the two people.
Just
I don't know.
It's just Chewbacca, lower class citizen for being a Wookiee, apparently, does not get a medal.
Maybe Han had a change of heart and said, take all of my winnings, like all of the money that I earned, and weld that down.
Whoa,
and make medals for me and my friend.
So they're going to gild the... Okay, so then... Well, and why doesn't Leia get one? I realize that she's the presenter of the medals, but she is the one who had the plans, got the plans to Kenobi, got the plans back to...
Well, she is...
the team.
She's like executive level. She is one of the...
Oh, so she doesn't get a medal.
Leader. Yeah, she's not getting... What is she going to do with medals? Like, she is already at the top of the leadership schema.
You don't think they need recognition?
They have other ways. They don't need medals. Like, medals are for lower...
now she's the princess of a planet that doesn't exist anymore. Give her a medal. Let her...
She doesn't want a medal.
Let her have it. Okay, so Drea, now that we've gone through the movie, there's now our shadow was shot but spins off out into space. So the shadow has not been vanquished. But our hero has now moved from a white uniform to a khaki jacket and darker clothes a little bit. He's now got that confidence. He's got that boost. He's now got that confidence, that boost. We're going to see, as I mentioned in the last episode, we're going to see as his costume literally gets darker and darker. So for those people that don't understand how he could go to a dark place, I don't know what you're talking about. Visually, it's all right there. But what do you think? Looking back at this movie for the umpteenth millionth time, but this time specifically with this show in mind, and the hero's journey in mind, what do you think?
I mean, if you were to take the hero's journey as an exercise, and I think we all should, we map it onto various stories, especially ones that we care about and we love. Let's be real. When we were children or youngsters or even adults first encountering this movie, we were not participating in this kind of exercise. And when we sit down and watch any movie, usually we're not participating in this kind of in-depth mapping to these different milestones of a larger paradigm. Having said that, it does really work. It really fits. I think that I prefer a more seamless exploration of Luke's self-discovery. That not so much do I want to look at each phase and each of the different allies and antagonists in this formula. I prefer to approach a more, dynamic exploration of his self-discovery. When is he feeling vulnerable and lost? When is he feeling a sense of a more clear ego?
Yeah.
When is he seeing himself in the villains that are supposed to be against him?
Well, good news for you.
We're going to see all of that.
All of that comes in the next movie.
Well, yeah. So my, I guess my philosophies and the models that I use around understanding characters actually aren't from the hero's journey. They're from other. There are other philosophers
Sure.
and folks that have taught us about human psychology. So it's helpful, but to me, it just doesn't feel. I think I'm missing some emotional piece of this. I don't have the emotionality that I want.
Yeah.
That I can get from other paradigms.
Totally fair. I want to stress that this was the first movie made out of the 6 that Lucas personally had something to do with. And it is strictly a fairy tale. It is not meant to get super deep into character and emotions and all that stuff. All of that came starting with Empire, where we see all the vulnerability of Luke and the characters around him, greater mentor figures trying to instill certain things into him, but him still remaining himself and all of that coming out. And we'll dive into that. But when people talk about Star Wars having been a simple story, I think that's what you're describing right now.
Sure.
Like the story is the story. The story is very much an exploration of Joseph Campbell's monomyth, but is that what we want psychologically speaking? Probably not. We want something deeper, bigger.
Well, let's do that when we look at the next films.
Yeah.
Let's discard the hero's journey as the model that we're exploring.
Correct. Yes.
And maybe we can look at Jungian psychology. We can look at Freudian psychology. We can look at some of those other models that'll take us closer to that exploration of defenses and reactions and experiences that I think are a little bit more like the ones we have in real life.
Yeah.
Not to dismiss the hero's journey, because we're all
Sure.
in that, but
Sure.
it's those other philosophers and psychologists who put that depth into the hero's journey paradigm that I think we could really gain some ideas from, some insights from.
So now we get to go and talk about some classic psychology, some Jungian and Freudian, all those old
Just
hacks.
like the era. No, Brian, let's look at the era before your favorite era. Let's look
Yeah.
at the first half
Yeah.
of the 20th century.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff.
Yeah. Till next time, Drea, why don't you tell the folks so they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on Twitter and Instagram at Arkham Asylum Doc, and now on Mastodon at Dr. Drea. DRDREA.
Awesome. You can find me on Twitter for as long as it exists, at bward028. You can find me on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions. You can also find me on Mastodon. I am Brian Ward at mstdn.social.
.social.
Come join us on Facebook. Come join Patreon. I want to thank some of the patrons who have made this episode possible. You've got my father, Carl Ward. You've got Michael Pruitt, Weffy, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Eric O'Sullivan, Zach Neal, Mike Blanchard, Dr. Girlfriend, John Henry, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Antonio Lopez, Candy B, Hero's Journey Fitness, Todd Stashwick, Scott the Therapist, Frank Moeller, my best friend, Mark Pepper, Emily Higgins, and Swara Ali. Thank you all so much for your contributions and helping make these episodes possible. You can join patreon.com/Arkham Sessions and come join any number of tiers. As we had talked about in the last couple of episodes, we're going to continue to do our analyses of Andor. That next analysis is coming up very shortly. So go join the Batman Beyond tier, and you'll get a feed that will give you our analyses of Andor. Be sure to follow our family over at Fanbase Press. And until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
the Arkham Sessions.
Don't you call me a mindless philosopher, you overweight glob of grease.